The cold on the planet Isolara was a living thing. It crept into every crevice of the jagged ice cliffs. It seeped into every crack in the frozen ground, and it clutched at anything that dared to move across its endless, white expanse. Nyla, a small alien orphan, huddled against a jagged rock, her thin blue skin shimmering faintly under the pale light of the distant sun. Her limbs trembled not from weakness but from the biting cold that had become her constant enemy. She had been alone for as long as she could remember, abandoned after the war that had destroyed her colony. Her people had left her behind, assuming that the icy wasteland would claim her life quickly. But Nyla was clever. She had survived longer than anyone could have expected. Her large black eyes scanned the horizon constantly. She sniffed the bitter wind with her sharp senses, always alert for predators or hidden dangers beneath the ice. She had learned to gather what little food the planet provided, breaking the thin crust of frozen plants and small creatures with her delicate, clawed hands. Every day was a struggle, every night a test of endurance. Today, the cold seemed harsher than usual. The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying shards of ice that cut her skin like knives. Nyla curled tighter into herself, drawing what warmth she could from her small body. She knew she could not survive another night without shelter, but the ice offered none. Her stomach ached empty for far too long. She whispered to herself in the chirps and clicks of her native tongue, hoping her words might somehow comfort her, though she was the only listener. Meanwhile, many kilometers away, a human ship descended slowly through the thin, icy atmosphere. Dr. Elias Kane, a seasoned human medic, peered through the observation window at the frozen landscape. He had been sent as part of a human exploratory team to study Isolara, to assess its resources and document any signs of life. Most of his team was focused on mapping the ice and recording mineral samples, but Kane had always had a different perspective. He believed that no life was worthless, no matter how small or strange. A sudden blip on the ship's sensors caught his attention. It was faint, irregular, a heartbeat perhaps buried beneath the static and cold. Kane's brow furrowed. He adjusted the sensors, focusing on the signal. The readings were weak but unmistakable. "There's something down there," he muttered almost to himself. "Alive as someone," or something his team protested. "It's too risky, Kane. That storm could kill you before you even reach it." "Why bother? Could be an animal or just a glitch." Kane shook his head. "No, it's alive and it's struggling. I can't ignore that. Life deserves a chance." By the time Kane and his small reconnaissance unit reached the planet's surface, the storm had intensified. Snow whipped around them in thick curtains and the cold penetrated even their insulated suits. Kane guided the team, following the faint sensor readings toward the source. Hours passed, each step a battle against the elements. Then through the white haze, Kane saw a small figure huddled near a rock outcrop. It was Nyla. She was barely moving, her limbs stiff with cold, her breath shallow. Kane felt an immediate surge of urgency. "She's dying," he said. "We have to act fast." The human team quickly deployed a portable shelter pod. Kane knelt beside Nyla, careful not to frighten her further. She recoiled at first, her large black eyes wide with fear. Humans were dangerous in her experience, even more so than the predators that roamed the icy plains. But Kane spoke softly, using simple words and gentle gestures. "It's okay. You're safe. I won't hurt you." The alien orphan tilted her head, unsure if she should trust this giant strange being. Her body shivered violently and her tiny hands clawed at the snow. Kane worked quickly, opening heat packs and wrapping her in insulated blankets. He placed her inside the pod, activating the emergency warming system. Slowly, the life signs on the pod's monitor began to stabilize. Nyla's survival instincts, honed over months of solitude, were still sharp. She watched Kane carefully, noticing his movements, the way he adjusted the blankets and the warmth he radiated. Something inside her stirred, a faint sense of trust, fragile but real. She chirped softly, a sound of uncertainty and curiosity. Kane smiled gently. "You're strong," he said, "and smart. You'll get through this." Hours passed. Outside, the storm raged on and the pod creaked under the pressure of the wind. Inside, Kane worked tirelessly to stabilize Nyla's condition. He had to improvise, using his own body heat to supplement the pod's failing systems. His hands moved quickly, tending to frostbite and dehydration, giving her water through a small tube, and feeding her nutrient pastes that could sustain her until proper food was available. Nyla began to respond. Her shivers lessened and her breathing slowed to a steadier rhythm. She chirped again, this time more deliberately, and Kane noticed a pattern in the sounds. Over the next few hours, he began to understand some of her gestures and chirps, learning the basics of her communication. Each interaction was small but significant, a bridge forming between two very different beings. Through this fragile connection, Kane learned something important. Nyla was not just a helpless orphan. She was intelligent, observant, and capable of understanding her surroundings with a sophistication that surprised even him. Her people, though lost, had left behind a spark of brilliance in her. Kane marveled at her resilience. He had treated injured humans before, but nothing compared to the determination in this small alien life form. The night was the hardest. The storm intensified and the pod's systems began to falter despite Kane's best efforts. He could feel the cold seeping in, a reminder that survival was never guaranteed, but he refused to give up. Every minute counted and every action mattered. Nyla, sensing his determination, responded with her own. She pressed herself closer to the heat source, conserving energy, her large eyes tracking his every movement. It was a silent agreement. They would survive together. As the hours dragged on, Kane's team monitored the pod from the nearby base. They could see the struggle in the readings, the spikes and drops in Nyla's life signs, but they also saw the gradual stabilization. Kane's improvisation and care were working. He whispered softly to her, though she could not understand his words completely. His tone, his presence conveyed everything. You are not alone. You will survive. By morning, the storm began to wane. Weak sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting long shadows across the ice. Nyla opened her eyes fully for the first time since Kane found her. She blinked, unsure of the brightness, but her body was warmer, her heart steadier. She chirped once, a sound that Kane understood immediately as gratitude. You've been through a lot, Kane said, but we're not done yet. We have to get to safety. He knew the pod could not remain in place indefinitely. Repairs were necessary, and the base was still many kilometers away. Kane prepared for the journey, carefully lifting Nyla into his arms. She tensed at first, her claws digging lightly into his suit, but she did not resist. She trusted him enough to follow. The trek across the icy plains was treacherous. The ground was slick with hidden ice sheets, and sudden crevasses could open without warning. Kane moved carefully, using his experience and knowledge of the terrain to navigate. Nyla clung to him, her small body surprisingly agile, sensing hazards before he did. Together, they moved as a unit, each relying on the other's strengths. During the journey, Kane reflected on the significance of what he was doing. This small alien life form represented more than survival. She was a reminder that humanity's true strength lay not in technology or weapons, but in empathy, compassion, and the willingness to protect life that others might ignore. He had read about HFY stories, about humans overcoming impossible odds, but now he was living it. Nyla, for her part, was beginning to understand humans in her own way. Kane's voice, calm and steady, became a comfort. His movements, careful and precise, taught her that not all beings were dangerous. She chirped occasionally, testing the sounds, and Kane responded with gentle nods and encouraging words. Slowly, a bridge formed between their species, one built on trust, survival, and shared struggle. As night approached again, the temperature began to drop rapidly. Kane found a small ice cavern, a natural shelter. He set up a temporary heat source, wrapping Nyla securely. They huddled together, sharing warmth and quiet. For the first time in her life, Nyla did not feel abandoned. She felt protected, and for the first time in many months, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cavern, there was a fragile sanctuary. Kane whispered to her, "Tomorrow we'll reach the base. You'll be safe there. You're stronger than anyone thinks." Nyla chirped softly in reply, a sound that could almost be called a smile. The storm had not ended, and danger still waited beyond the ice. But for this night, survival had been won. Kane and Nyla rested, each drawing strength from the other. And though neither knew exactly what the future would hold, one truth was clear. Together they could endure even the coldest, most merciless planet in the galaxy. The ice cavern offered temporary relief, but Dr. Elias Kane knew it could not hold them for long. The base was still many kilometers away, and the storm outside had not completely passed. Nyla, the small alien orphan, huddled close, her thin blue skin glowing faintly in the dim heat of the makeshift camp. She was stronger than she had been yesterday, but still frail. Her large black eyes followed Kane's every movement, and for the first time she trusted him completely. Kane surveyed the path they would take. The terrain was treacherous, a frozen expanse of jagged ice cliffs, deep fissures, and hidden snow pits. He could see the faint outline of a ridge in the distance, where he believed the base was located. It was a long journey, and any misstep could be fatal. But he would not leave her behind. She had survived this long against impossible odds, and he was determined to see her safely to human hands who could care for her properly. They left the cavern as the first pale light of dawn appeared. The wind was still sharp, cutting at Kane's suit and making his face numb despite the helmet's insulation. Nyla clung tightly to him, her small claws gently gripping his coat. She made soft chirping sounds, and Kane interpreted them as both communication and comfort. He spoke to her in quiet words, explaining each step, though she did not understand the language fully. The tone, calm and consistent, was enough. The first obstacle appeared quickly. A deep crevasse split the ice field ahead, nearly invisible beneath a thin layer of snow. Kane stopped, assessing the width and depth. The wind carried away his sense of balance, but Nyla's instincts were sharper. She pressed against his side, nudging him with a small claw toward a more solid route across. Kane followed her subtle guidance, testing the ice carefully. With her help, they found a narrow ledge that allowed them to cross safely. Kane smiled down at her. "You have a good sense for danger," he said. Nyla chirped softly, almost proudly, as if acknowledging the compliment. Hours passed in this careful dance across the ice. Nyla's body, adapted to the cold, allowed her to move with agility Kane could not match. Yet Kane's strength and knowledge guided them past hazards she could not anticipate. Together they formed a perfect partnership. Kane carried supplies, monitored their progress, and adjusted their path, while Nyla provided insight into hidden dangers, sensing shifts in the wind and subtle changes in the ice. Midway through their journey, a new threat emerged. From the horizon, Kane spotted movement, small, fast silhouettes darting across the ice. Mercenaries. Humans or aliens, he could not tell, but their intent was clear: capture any unusual life forms, especially aliens. Kane shielded Nyla instinctively, lowering his body behind an ice ridge. Nyla pressed close, her breathing fast but controlled. Kane whispered, "We cannot fight them head-on. We have to outsmart them." He scanned the terrain, noting a nearby cave entrance partially concealed by ice. It was risky, but it might provide temporary cover. Carefully, he moved toward it, pulling Nyla along. The mercenaries were fast, closing the distance, their movements precise and aggressive. Nyla sensed the danger more acutely than Kane did. She chirped rapidly, pointing with a claw toward a hidden slope of softer snow. Kane understood. Using her guidance, he led them through the concealed path, the snow cushioning their steps. The mercenaries' sensors did not detect the subtle differences, and Kane realized that Nyla's instincts had saved them from immediate capture. Inside the cave, they rested briefly. Nyla's small body pressed against Kane, her trust complete now. Kane checked her condition, noting the frostbite on her fingers and the exhaustion in her limbs. "You've been through so much," he said quietly, "but we are almost there." He activated a portable heating unit, warming the air around her and himself. The cave, however, was not without danger. The ice ceiling was thin in places and loose shards threatened to fall. Kane moved with care, teaching Nyla to watch and predict hazards. She chirped and nodded in her own way, learning quickly from his experience. Together they were a team, human and alien, each complementing the other's abilities. After hours of careful travel, the base appeared on the horizon. Its lights shone faintly in the snow, a beacon of safety in the endless ice. Kane felt relief, but he knew the final approach would be the hardest. The mercenaries were still in pursuit, and he could see their movement from the distance, though they had not detected the cave escape. He whispered to Nyla, "We have to move fast but carefully. Can you trust me to lead?" Nyla chirped firmly, pressing close. The answer was clear. They emerged from the cave, navigating a narrow ice ridge that led toward the base. Kane carried Nyla in his arms now, her small body light but valuable. The mercenaries spotted them, raising weapons, but Kane did not panic. He scanned the ice ridge and found a slope that led to a natural ice tunnel, partially hidden from sight. Using Nyla's instincts and his own experience, they descended, moving faster than the mercenaries anticipated. Nyla's abilities surprised Kane. She could sense thermal fluctuations, detecting the heat signatures of the pursuers even before he could. She chirped and gestured, guiding him around obstacles through hidden paths and over cracks in the ice. Together they became a force of survival, their bond strengthening with every step. Finally, they reached the base perimeter. Kane signaled for the human guards, explaining quickly that he had rescued an alien life form from the ice. There was hesitation at first. Nyla was unlike anything they had seen. But Kane insisted, demonstrating her intelligence and survival skills. He showed how she had guided them past hazards and evaded pursuers. He spoke with conviction, emphasizing her value and the moral responsibility to protect her. The base commander, a stern woman with decades of experience, studied Nyla carefully. The small alien blinked at her, chirped softly, and even reached out a claw in a gesture that seemed almost human in its simplicity. Kane explained that Nyla's instincts and intelligence had saved both their lives. The commander, seeing the truth in Kane's words and Nyla's abilities, finally nodded. She will be protected, and she will have a place here. Inside the base, Nyla was introduced to warmth, nourishment, and safety. She explored slowly at first, cautious but curious. Humans moved around her, studying and helping, but Kane stayed close. He continued teaching her, translating her chirps and gestures into simple words and concepts. Slowly, Nyla began to understand human language, and humans began to understand her. Over the following days, Nyla demonstrated her usefulness and intelligence. She helped locate weak points in the ice storage systems, predicted shifts in the weather that the sensors had not detected, and even saved a human technician from a collapsing ice tunnel. Kane watched proudly, realizing that Nyla was not just an orphaned alien but a valuable member of the team. More importantly, she became a symbol. Her story, the survival against impossible odds, the rescue by a compassionate human, and her growing ability to interact and contribute, inspired those around her. Kane often reflected on it, thinking about how humanity's strength lay not just in technology but in empathy, courage, and the willingness to act when others might ignore life in need. Nyla, once a frostbitten orphan abandoned to a harsh world, began to find a new home. She laughed in her own way when she finally understood the warmth of the base's indoor sun lamps. She explored corridors, chirping questions to Kane, and Kane answered patiently, teaching her about humans, their customs, and their desire to protect life wherever it might be found. The bond between human and alien grew. Kane saw in Nyla a reflection of the best qualities humanity could achieve: curiosity, resilience, and trust. Nyla saw in Kane a protector, a teacher, and a friend. Together they proved that species could overcome differences, that life could be valued no matter how small or fragile, and that compassion could bridge worlds. One morning, as Nyla gazed out at the ice plains from the safety of the base's observation deck, she chirped softly. Kane stood beside her, looking at the horizon. The wind howled beyond the walls, the frozen landscape vast and empty, yet she no longer feared it. She had survived. She had learned. And she had someone who would stand beside her, guiding her, protecting her, and respecting her as a being of value. Kane put a hand gently on her small shoulder. "You are stronger than the cold, Nyla. Stronger than anyone imagined. And this is only the beginning. One day, you will help others like yourself, and humanity will be there with you." Nyla chirped, tilting her head, and Kane understood it as agreement. In that moment, the storm outside was no longer a threat, but a reminder of the journey they had survived together. The orphaned alien and the human medic had faced the frozen wasteland, had trusted each other, and had emerged victorious. Nyla's story was no longer one of abandonment but of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between species. The galaxy beyond Isolara stretched with countless possibilities, and Kane knew that together they could face anything. Nyla had survived the coldest planet in the sector, but more importantly, she had discovered warmth in trust, courage in companionship, and the promise of a future where humans and aliens could protect each other and thrive together. The sun rose over the icy horizon, casting long rays over the frozen world. Inside the base, Nyla chirped happily, exploring a small patch of newly thawed ground. Kane smiled, knowing that this small life, abandoned in frost,